Don't look at the mirror right now. Seriously, if you're in a room with one, turn your chair around or throw a towel over it before I keep going. Because once you know the rule, you become part of the game, and I don't think you can ever really stop playing. My name is Tyler. About a month ago, I was desperate for cash. My tuition was due, and my crappy part-time job wasn't cutting it. So when I saw a posting on a local community board for a 2-week house-sitting gig paying $2,000 up front, I didn't ask questions. I just called. The house was out in the older, quieter part of the suburbs, set way back from the street behind some overgrown oak trees. It was a massive, gloomy place that smelled faintly of lavender and old dust. The owners, the Millers, were a jittery, intense older couple heading on a European cruise. Before they rushed out to catch their cab, Mrs. Miller shoved an envelope of cash into my hand and pointed to a typed list taped to the refrigerator. "Follow the list, Tyler," she whispered, her eyes wide and unblinking. "Especially the first one. It's life or death." I thought she was being dramatic. Old rich people are weird, right? The list was mostly standard stuff. Water the ferns, don't let the indoor cat Barnaby outside. But Rule 1 was typed in bold, red capital letters at the top. Never uncover the mirrors between sunset and sunrise. Do not look into them. I looked around. Every single reflective surface in the house was draped in thick, heavy sheets. The hallway mirrors, the bathroom vanity, even the glass front of the microwave had a tea towel taped over it. It was bizarre, but for $2,000, I was willing to play along with their eccentricities. The first 3 nights were boring. Just me, Netflix, and Barnaby the cat, who spent most of his time staring at the draped grandfather clock in the foyer, his tail twitching nervously. It started on Thursday night. I was in the downstairs half bath washing my hands. A heavy floral sheet was taped over the medicine cabinet. As I reached for a hand towel, I heard a sound. It was soft, unmistakable. Tap, tap, tap. It came from behind the floral sheet, right at eye level. I froze, water dripping from my hands. The house was dead silent. I leaned closer to the glass. Tap, a scratch. Like a fingernail gently dragging across the other side of the mirror. My stomach dropped. I convinced myself it was a mouse in the wall or old pipes, anything but the obvious. I backed out of the bathroom and shut the door tight. By Saturday, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. It felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Barnaby wouldn't come downstairs anymore. He just hid under the guest bed, hissing at nothing. I started seeing things in my peripheral vision. I'd be walking past a darkened window at night, and just for a fraction of a second, I swear I'd see a shape standing behind me in the faint reflection against the black glass. When I'd whip around, the room was empty. The temptation started to gnaw at me. It's that stupid human impulse to push the big red button. Why were they so afraid? What could possibly be in there? On the last night, a nasty summer storm rolled in, knocking out the power around 11 p.m. The silence in that big house was suffocating. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone for light, when a massive crash echoed from upstairs. It sounded like furniture being thrown. My heart hammered against my ribs. I grabbed the heavy flashlight from the kitchen drawer and crept up the stairs. The sound had come from the master bedroom. The door was ajar. I pushed it open with the tip of my sneaker. The room was a wreck. The bed was overturned. And in the center of the room, the massive, standalone cheval mirror, the one with the heaviest velvet cover, was lying face up on the floor. The cover had slid completely off. The beam of my flashlight hit the exposed glass before I could stop myself. I was looking down into the mirror. At first, it was just my reflection, pale and terrified in the flashlight beam. But then I realized something was wrong. The perspective was off. In the mirror, I wasn't looking down at the floor. I was looking up from the floor at the ceiling. And the me in the reflection wasn't holding a flashlight. He was holding the heavy brass fireplace poker from downstairs. And he wasn't looking at me. He was looking over my shoulder, toward the bedroom closet door behind me, grinning this horrible, wide grin that didn't contain an ounce of humanity. I didn't look in the closet. I didn't even breathe. I bolted. I left my stuff, left the keys, and ran out into the rain to my car. I didn't stop driving until I was 3 towns over at an all-night diner. I blocked the Miller's number. I never went back. I tried to tell myself it was stress or a hallucination brought on by the storm. But yesterday, I was walking past a department store window downtown in broad daylight. There was a split second, just a glitch, where my reflection didn't keep walking when I did. It stopped and stared at me as I passed by. The rule wasn't to keep something in the mirrors. I think it was to keep us out of theirs. And I don't think I managed to stay out. If you ever see a job posting for an overnight security gig that pays double the normal rate, do yourself a favor and keep scrolling. Seriously, don't even click on it. I thought I'd struck gold when I landed the night watchman job at the old OmniCorp data center out past the suburbs. But now I know why the last guy left in the middle of his shift without even picking up his paycheck. My name is Mike, and I'm a pretty typical 22-year-old college student. I'm broke, tired, and desperate for tuition money. The job seemed perfect. Sit at a desk from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., watch some monitors in a quiet building, and get paid $30 an hour to basically do my homework. The facility was one of those sterile, windowless concrete boxes tucked away in a half-empty business park. It was dead silent out there at night. The hearing manager, a nervous guy named Mr. Henderson, whose suit seemed 2 sizes too big, met me on my first night. He gave me a heavy ring of keys and a very specific list of rules typed on a laminated card. "It's an easy job, Mike," Henderson had said, refusing to make eye contact. "Just stick to the protocol." The protocol was mostly standard stuff: log patrolling rounds every hour, keep the front doors locked. But the last rule on the card was highlighted in red marker. Rule 5. Never open the basement access door between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. Ignore any sounds from below during this hour. I asked him about it naturally. He just got clammy and mumbled something about old pipes settling and automated server maintenance. He left before I could ask anything else. The first 3 nights were numbingly boring. Just the hum of the HVAC system and the blue glow of 12 security monitors. I started to think Henderson was just hazing the new guy. Then Thursday night hit. Around 2:15 a.m., I was staring at the monitor wall. Camera 7 showed the long basement corridor leading to that access door I wasn't supposed to open. It was empty, just gray concrete lit by flickering fluorescent lights. I looked down at my textbook for maybe 10 seconds. When I looked back up, the door on camera 7 was wide open. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard an alarm. I rewinded the footage. On playback, the door didn't just open. It slammed open violently, like someone kicked it from the inside. But nobody walked out. The hall remained empty. I grabbed my heavy flashlight, my heart hammering against my ribs. I walked down the main hall, the silence suddenly feeling heavy and oppressive. When I got to the basement access stairwell, the door was physically locked tight. I yanked the handle. It wouldn't budge. I went back to the desk, trying to rationalize it. Maybe a camera glitch, old wiring. At 3:03 a.m., exactly on time, the sound started. It wasn't pipes settling. It sounded like heavy furniture being dragged across concrete directly underneath my desk. Then came the scraping. Scritch, 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 like metal fingernails clawing at the underside of the floorboards. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the laminated rule card. Ignore any sounds. Then the phone on the desk rang, the internal line. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the receiver. The caller ID just read, basement. I picked it up slowly. Hello, security. Silence. Then faintly, under layers of static, I heard a voice. It sounded wet and desperate. Help me, he locked us in. It sounded like a kid, a little girl. Who is this? I stammered, terrified. Where are you? Rule 5, the voice whispered, suddenly crystal clear and right in my ear. Henderson lied about Rule 5. The line went dead. I couldn't just sit there. Rule or no rule, if someone was trapped down there, I had to check. I grabbed the master keys. My hands were shaking so badly I barely got the key into the basement stairwell lock. I turned it. The deadbolt clicked open. The smell hit me instantly. Old water, copper, and something foul like spoiled meat. I crept down the metal stairs, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. At the bottom, it wasn't a server room. It was just a dirt floor room with a single wooden chair in the center. Sitting in the chair was Mr. Henderson. He was wearing the same ill-fitting suit. He wasn't tied up. He was just sitting there, smiling at me in the dark. "You broke the rule, Mike," he said softly. Before I could react, the metal door at the top of the stairs slammed shut behind me. The lights in the basement flickered on, blindingly bright. I wasn't looking at Henderson anymore. I was looking at a mirror propped on the chair. I looked into the mirror, and that's when I realized the true horror wasn't what was in the basement. It was what wasn't. I had no reflection. And then over the intercom speakers in the ceiling, I heard a new voice. It was my own voice, sounding bored and tired. Log entry, 3:45 a.m. Another breach in the basement containment unit. Subject Mike has failed the protocol test and entered the hazard zone, initiating purge sequence. I'm still in the basement. The lights went out hours ago. I think the person who hired me, the real me, is about to finish his shift upstairs. I am writing this while sitting in the back of a police cruiser, and I can still feel the cold breath on the back of my neck. If you ever find a list of rules left for you by someone you trust, please, for the love of God, do not think you are smarter than the person who wrote them. Curiosity does not just kill the cat. It lets things in that were never meant to walk on this side of the dirt. My name is Jason. I am 21, and like most guys my age, I thought I was invincible. Last October, my Uncle Steve asked me to watch his cabin in the deep woods of Washington State while he went up to Alaska for a fishing trip. Steve is a forest ranger, a rugged guy who does not scare easily. So when I saw the note he left on the kitchen table, I almost laughed. The note was titled The Cabin Rules. It had 3 points. Rule 1, keep the curtains closed after the sun goes down. Rule 2, if you hear a knock on any window, knock back exactly twice. Rule 3, never under any circumstances unlock the back door before sunrise, no matter what you hear outside. I figured Steve was just messing with me. This was the same guy who used to tell me Bigfoot stories to keep me from wandering off the trail when I was a kid. I spent the first night scrolling through my phone and eating cheap fast food I'd picked up in the last town. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Around midnight, the first rule got tested. I was in the living room when I heard a soft thud against the glass of the big picture window. I froze. Then came a rhythmic tapping. It sounded like someone was using a single fingernail to click against the pane. My heart started thudding against my ribs. I remembered the note. I stood up, walked over to the window, and knocked back twice. The tapping stopped instantly. The silence that followed was even heavier than before. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I tried to rationalize it. It was probably a bird or maybe a branch. I went to bed and actually managed to sleep. The second night was when things went south. It started with a whisper. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard my name, Jason. It was faint, muffled by the heavy wood of the cabin walls, but it was definitely my name. I walked toward the back door, my hands shaking. Through the thick oak, I heard it again. Jason, please help me. It is so cold. I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew that voice. It was my sister, Emily, but that was impossible. Emily had passed away in a car accident 3 years ago. I stood there paralyzed, my hand hovering over the heavy brass deadbolt of the back door. "Jason, it hurts. Open the door. I can see the lights." It sounded so real. I could hear her shivering. I could hear the specific way she used to catch her breath when she was crying. Panic took over. I forgot about Steve's note. I forgot about the rules. I thought that maybe, somehow, she was out there. I grabbed the lock and twisted it. The click of the bolt echoed through the house like a gunshot. I pulled the door open, expecting to see my sister, but there was no one on the porch. The woods were pitch black, the trees standing like giant, skeletal fingers against the sky. The air was freezing, and it smelled like wet earth and rotting meat. I stepped out onto the porch, calling her name. "Emily, are you there?" Then I heard it, a low, wet chuckle coming from right behind me, inside the cabin. I spun around. Standing in the middle of the kitchen was something that looked like my Uncle Steve, but the proportions were all wrong. Its arms were too long, reaching down past its knees. Its skin looked like gray parchment stretched over a skull, but the worst part was the eyes. They were completely white, reflecting the kitchen light like a pair of dead marbles. It reached out and pulled the door shut, locking it from the inside. I was standing on the porch, and the thing that looked like Steve was looking at me through the glass. It tapped on the window, twice. That is when the realization hit me like a physical blow. The rules were not there to keep things out of the cabin. They were there to keep the person inside safe from whatever was already living there. Uncle Steve was not in Alaska. He had not been a ranger in years. I had spent 2 days living with something that was just waiting for me to break a rule so it could swap places. I ran. I did not grab my keys or my phone. I just sprinted into the dark woods, guided only by the moonlight. I could hear branches snapping behind me, not like something was chasing me, but like something was walking casually, knowing I had nowhere to go. I finally made it to the main road and flagged down a passing trucker. The police went to the cabin, but they found it empty. No Steve, no note, no nothing. Just my own phone sitting on the kitchen table and a new note written in my own handwriting that I do not remember writing. It said, "Rule 4, do not let him tell the story." I am sitting in this car now, and the officer driving has not said a word since we started. He just keeps looking at me in the rearview mirror. His eyes look a little too bright, a little too white. If you are listening to this and you hear a voice you recognize calling you from the dark, stay inside. Don't be like me. Don't break the rules. I am currently sitting in a brightly lit 24-hour diner because I am too terrified to go back home. If you have a basement in your house, do me a favor. Go check the lock on the door right now. Not just to see if it is turned, but to see if the wood around the frame looks like it has been chewed. Because I didn't notice that until it was much too late. My name is Tyler. I am 24, and last year I finally saved up enough to put a down payment on a small fixer-upper in a quiet suburb just outside of Pittsburgh. It was one of those classic American neighborhoods where everyone has a manicured lawn and a Ring camera on their front porch. The house was a steal because the previous owner had passed away inside, but that didn't bother me. I'm a night shift data analyst, so I'm used to being alone in the dark. I like the quiet. Or I used to. The house was perfect except for the basement. It was one of those old-school Pennsylvania basements with stone walls that always felt damp, no matter how many dehumidifiers I ran. It smelled like wet earth and old pennies. I only went down there to do laundry, and even then, I always felt this weird pressure in my ears, like the air was heavier down there. About a month ago, the sound started. I'd be sitting in my home office around 2:00 a.m., and I'd hear a heavy, wet thud coming from directly beneath my feet. It wasn't the sound of pipes or the house settling. It sounded like someone had dropped a massive, waterlogged steak onto the concrete floor. I tried to tell myself it was just a stray animal that had found a way in. I called a local pest control guy named Mike. He went down there with a high-powered flashlight, poked around the corners, and came back up looking confused. He told me there were no holes, no droppings, nothing. But as he was leaving, he pointed at the basement door in my kitchen. He asked why I had 3 different deadbolts on a door that just leads to a laundry room. I told him they were there when I moved in. He just shook his head and told me to stay safe. That night, I decided to set up one of my old security cameras at the top of the basement stairs. I needed to know what I was dealing with. Around 3:15 a.m., while I was working on a spreadsheet, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. My heart skipped a beat. I opened the app and looked at the live feed. The basement door was closed, but the camera was pointed at the gap at the bottom of the door. In the infrared night vision, I saw something move. It was pale, thin, and looked like a series of long, multi-jointed fingers sliding through the crack. They were searching the floor, feeling around with a blind, frantic energy. Then, the fingers gripped the bottom of the door and started to pull. The wood began to groan. I watched in horror as those fingers actually started to shave bits of wood off the frame. I didn't go down there. I pushed a heavy bookshelf in front of the door and stayed up until the sun came out. I told myself I was overreacting. I thought maybe I was just hallucinated from lack of sleep. But when I checked the door the next morning, the bottom edge was shredded. I called my neighbor, an older guy named Mr. Henderson who had lived on the block for 40 years. I asked him if he knew anything about the previous owner of my house. He got real quiet, looking over his shoulder at my place. He told me the old lady who lived there used to order 5 pounds of raw ground beef from the local butcher every single day, even though she was a vegetarian. He said people used to hear her talking to the floorboards late at night, apologizing over and over again. The escalation happened fast after that. 2 nights ago, I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when I heard a voice. It wasn't a growl or a monster noise. It was a voice that sounded exactly like my own. It was coming from behind the basement door. Tyler, it said. "Tyler, I'm stuck. The light is out. Can you come down and help me?" It was my voice. Same pitch, same slight stutter when I'm nervous. It was uncanny. I felt this sick, cold wave of dread wash over me. I wasn't just scared. I felt like my identity was being robbed. I grabbed a kitchen knife and shouted that I was calling the cops. The voice changed instantly. It dropped an octave and became wet and distorted. It didn't sound like me anymore. It sounded like something trying to play a record at the wrong speed. It started slamming against the door with such force that the bookshelf I'd moved began to slide across the linoleum. I lost it. I grabbed my car keys and ran toward the front door, but as I passed the hallway, I saw the basement camera feed on my phone. The door was still closed, but the thing wasn't behind the door anymore. The camera showed the basement was empty. The laundry was scattered, but there was a hole in the ceiling of the basement, a hole that led directly into the crawl space under my living room. I realized then that the basement door was just a distraction. It had been in the walls the whole time. I made it to my car and didn't look back. I've been staying at this diner or in my car for 48 hours. I called the police for a welfare check and they told me the house was empty. They said they found the basement door wide open, but the bookshelf was still in front of it. Think about that for a second. The door was open, but the barrier hadn't been moved. It didn't go through the door. It went around. The reason I'm telling you this is because I got a text message 10 minutes ago. It was from my own number. It was a photo of the back of my head, taken through the window of this diner. The thing in the basement isn't in the basement anymore. It's out, and it's learning how to be me. So if you see me or someone who looks like me and I'm acting just a little bit too stiff or my voice sounds a little too much like a recording, keep running. And for God's sake, don't let me in.